October 9, 1967. A desolate Bolivian village called La Higuera. The man once feared across continents stood cornered, bloodied and bound. Ernesto Che Guevara. Revolutionary icon, guerrilla mastermind and one of the most polarizing figures of the 20th century, faced his executioners. With bullets already lodged in his legs, his rifle ripped from his grasp, and his right forearm shattered, he issued one final chilling challenge: shoot, coward. You are only going to kill a man. His words carried a haunting prophecy. The man could be destroyed, but the ideas he fought for would echo through generations. The Bolivian soldiers fired. Che Guevara, just 39 years old, collapsed lifeless. But what happened next reveals the depths of desperation his enemies felt, and the disturbing lengths they went to prove he was truly gone. The soldiers hauled Guevara's body into the village square, displaying it like a grotesque trophy. Photographers crowded around, snapping images of the fallen revolutionary while soldiers posed triumphantly beside him. Then came the most macabre act. They severed both his hands and shipped them to the Bolivian High Command. Fingerprints don't lie, and the governments hunting Guevara knew that without irrefutable proof of death, rumors would spread that he still roamed the mountains, ready to ignite another revolution. If this story grips you, then subscribe to Fleek of History right now. Hit that like button, turn on notifications, and join thousands uncovering the most shocking untold stories from history. Don't miss what's coming next. This is just the beginning. The most dangerous man alive. For years, Che Guevara was the world's most wanted guerrilla leader. Military dictatorships throughout Latin America, backed by the United States, saw him as their greatest threat. Unlike other communist leaders, Guevara possessed a magnetic charisma that transcended ideology, attracting followers from all walks of life. Students, intellectuals, workers, and peasants. He wasn't just a theorist locked in an office. He was a warrior in the field, someone who lived and fought alongside his men. What made Guevara truly terrifying to his enemies was his combination of intellect and ruthlessness. He was well-read, fluent in multiple languages, and could debate philosophy, economics, and military strategy with equal prowess. Yet he was also a man capable of ordering executions without hesitation, someone who believed that violence was not only justified but necessary for revolutionary change. His journey to becoming this feared figure began in 1955 when he met Fidel Castro in Mexico City. Castro, the son of a wealthy Cuban landowner, was planning an armed uprising against Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista. Guevara, already a committed Marxist after witnessing American imperialism firsthand across Latin America, joined Castro's movement immediately. Together, they would reshape Cuba and send shockwaves across the Western Hemisphere. The architect of revolution, Che Guevara earned his legendary status not through propaganda, but through battlefield brilliance. By late 1958, Castro's rebel forces were gaining momentum across Cuba. Guevara, now a commander, led a column of fighters towards Santa Clara, the capital of Las Villas province, and a critical government stronghold. Capturing Santa Clara would deliver a devastating psychological and strategic blow to Batista's regime. On December 28, 1958, Guevara's column arrived at the outskirts of Santa Clara. Despite being vastly outnumbered, government forces held superior numbers and firepower. Guevara devised a daring plan. His forces moved stealthily through the city's edges, launching surprise attacks that threw the defenders into chaos. Then came the masterstroke. Intelligence revealed that an armored train loaded with 350 soldiers, ammunition and weapons was heading toward the city to reinforce Batista's troops. Guevara mobilized tractors from the local agricultural school to tear up the railway tracks. As the armored train barreled forward, it derailed spectacularly, tumbling into chaos. The officers inside stumbled out, begging for a truce. Ordinary soldiers, exhausted and demoralized from fighting their own countrymen, began fraternizing with the rebels. Within hours, the train and all 350 men aboard surrendered. By January 1st, 1959, Santa Clara had fallen completely. The victory shattered Batista's grip on power. Within 12 hours, the dictator fled Cuba, leaving the island to Castro and Guevara. The revolution had triumphed. But Guevara's influence extended far beyond military victories. He penned Guerrilla Warfare, a tactical manual that became required reading for revolutionaries and counterinsurgency planners worldwide. His writings dissected the psychology of insurgency, the importance of winning popular support, and the brutal necessities of guerrilla combat. The man behind the icon, born in 1928 as Ernesto Guevara de la Serna in Rosario, Argentina, Che came from a middle-class family with a fascinating ancestry. His lineage traced back to Patrick Lynch, an Irish immigrant who arrived in Argentina in 1749, making Guevara a distant descendant of Irish heritage, a fact that endeared him to Irish Republicans and the IRA during his lifetime. The nickname Che wasn't a Revolutionary War name like Joseph Stalin's Man of Steel. It came from Guevara's distinctly Argentine habit of punctuating sentences with "che," a colloquial expression similar to "hey" or "pal." His comrades in Cuba affectionately adopted it, and it stuck. Guevara initially pursued medical studies, but after 2 years he abandoned formal education for a transformative journey across Latin America with his friend Alberto Granado. Traveling by motorcycle, they witnessed poverty, disease, and exploitation on a scale that shattered Guevara's worldview. He wasn't just a privileged young man seeking adventure. He actively provided medical care to impoverished villagers, treating wounds and illnesses wherever he could. This journey, later immortalized in the Motorcycle Diaries, exposed him to the brutal realities of economic systems dominated by foreign corporations and complicit local elites. Throughout South and Central America, vast estates called latifundia, remnants of colonial-era land distribution, concentrated wealth and power in the hands of a tiny elite, while millions languished in hunger and illiterate poverty. The American Empire. Let's establish some uncomfortable historical facts. After World War II, the United States dominated Latin American economies to an extent that many historians describe as neocolonialism. In Guatemala, the American-owned United Fruit Company controlled nearly half the country's arable land. In pre-revolutionary Cuba, American corporations owned approximately 40% of sugar farms, nearly all cattle ranches, 90% of mines, 80% of utilities, and half of the nation's railways. American banks held controlling stakes in Cuban financial institutions. For Guevara, these weren't abstract statistics. They represented systemic exploitation that condemned millions to lives of suffering. And the United States wasn't just economically dominant. It actively intervened to protect its interests, often violently. The event that cemented Guevara's transformation into a hardcore communist occurred in Guatemala in 1954. Democratically elected President Jacobo Arbenz had begun redistributing unused land from the United Fruit Company to landless peasants. The company, wielding enormous influence in Washington, lobbied the Eisenhower administration to act. The CIA orchestrated a coup, overthrowing Arbenz and installing a military dictatorship. The CIA even attempted to assassinate Arbenz directly. Efforts that failed, but the coup succeeded. Guevara was in Guatemala during these events. Watching a democratically elected government destroyed by American intervention radicalized him completely. He became convinced that only armed revolution could break the cycle of imperialism and exploitation. Cuba. From victory to crisis. After the revolution's success, Guevara became one of Cuba's most powerful figures. Castro appointed him head of the National Bank and Minister of Industries, giving him near total control over Cuba's economy. But Guevara's radical policies, nationalizing industries, collectivizing agriculture, and severing economic ties with the United States, had disastrous consequences. Within 2 years, Cuba's economy shrank by nearly 40%. The United States responded by imposing a comprehensive trade embargo, choking off Cuba's access to its largest trading partner. Cuba became dependent on the Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc nations for food, fuel, and economic support. The Soviets saw Cuba as a strategic prize. A communist foothold just 90 miles from American shores, perfect for spreading revolution throughout Latin America. Soviet aid came with weapons, rifles, artillery, fighter jets, anti-aircraft missiles. Then, in 1962, the Soviets made a proposal that nearly triggered World War III, placing nuclear-armed ballistic missiles in Cuba. These missiles could strike Washington, D.C. in just 13 minutes. Guevara traveled to the Soviet Union on August 30, 1962, to finalize the agreement personally. During discussions with Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, Guevara advocated for publicly announcing the missile deployment. But Khrushchev preferred secrecy. Guevara returned to Cuba, and shortly after, American U-2 spy planes detected the missile sites. The Cuban Missile Crisis brought humanity to the brink of nuclear annihilation. For 13 agonizing days, the world held its breath. Eventually, the Soviets agreed to remove the medium-range missiles in exchange for American concessions. But here's the chilling part. Declassified documents later revealed that Guevara had advocated for using nuclear weapons if the United States invaded Cuba. He was willing to risk nuclear war to defend the revolution. Even more disturbing, Soviet tactical nuclear weapons, including nuclear artillery, remained secretly stationed in Cuba into the 1980s, something American intelligence didn't discover until the 1990s. The relentless revolutionary. By the mid-1960s, Guevara's influence in Cuba was fading. He publicly admitted mistakes in managing the economy, resigned from his government posts, and committed himself to spreading revolution globally. In April 1965, he embarked on a goodwill tour of Africa, then assembled a small group of Cuban military advisors and traveled to the Congo to spark a continent-wide communist revolution. The African campaign proved disastrous. Guevara faced illiteracy rates far higher than in Latin America, severe language barriers despite speaking French, brutal climates, and debilitating asthma attacks. After months of frustration and failure, he abandoned the effort and set his sights on Bolivia. Bolivia seemed ideal for revolution. Severe poverty, exploited indigenous populations, and a history of political instability.
Guevara believed he could replicate Cuba's success. He was wrong. Bolivian peasants, unlike Cuban workers, didn't rally to his cause. The terrain was harsher, supply lines were non-existent, and CIA-trained Bolivian forces hunted him relentlessly. On October 8, 1967, Guevara's small band of fighters was ambushed in a ravine called Quebrada del Euro. Bullets tore through Guevara's legs. His rifle was knocked from his hands. As Bolivian soldiers closed in, he shouted, "Do not shoot. I am Che Guevara and worth more to you alive than dead." He was captured and taken to a small schoolhouse in La Higuera. Bolivian President René Barrientos, fearing Guevara would become a martyr if publicly tried, ordered his immediate execution. The order was relayed by CIA operative Felix Rodriguez, who personally informed Guevara he would be killed. Rodriguez also instructed soldiers not to shoot Guevara in the face, so the wounds would appear combat-related and cover up the illegal execution. On October 9, 1967, a Bolivian sergeant named Mario Terán entered the schoolhouse. Guevara's final words were defiant. "Shoot, coward. You are only going to kill a man." Terán fired, killing the revolutionary whose image would soon adorn millions of posters worldwide. After the execution, Rodriguez took Guevara's Rolex watch as a trophy, later proudly showing it to reporters. Guevara's body was displayed publicly, photographed extensively, and then his hands were severed and sent to Bolivian authorities for fingerprint verification. For years, his remains were buried in a mass grave, their location kept secret. Legacy of blood and idealism, Che Guevara remains one of history's most controversial figures. To millions, he represents resistance against oppression, a selfless fighter who abandoned wealth and power to struggle for the downtrodden. To millions of others, he's a ruthless executioner responsible for ordering the deaths of hundreds, possibly thousands, without fair trials. Both perspectives contain truth. Guevara personally ordered and carried out executions of suspected traitors, spies, and counter-revolutionaries. He wrote openly about killing with detachment, describing how a bullet to the temple ended uncomfortable situations. His willingness to use violence extended to advocating nuclear war. Yet he also taught illiterate rebels to read, provided medical care to the impoverished, and genuinely believed he was fighting for a more just world. His life was a complex tapestry of idealism and brutality, charisma and ruthlessness. After his death, Guevara's image exploded into global iconography. The famous 1960 photograph by Alberto Corda, showing Guevara gazing into the distance with fierce determination, became one of the most reproduced images in history. Students in the US and Europe, protesting the Vietnam War and demanding social change, plastered his face on walls and wore his image on t-shirts. Ironically, the man who fought against capitalism became a capitalist commodity. His image commodified and sold worldwide, often by the very corporations he despised. The final word. Che Guevara lived only 39 years, yet his impact reverberates decades later. He transformed from a middle-class medical student into a guerrilla commander, economic minister, and global revolutionary icon. His story is a stark reminder that history's most influential figures are rarely simple heroes or villains. They're complicated, flawed humans driven by conviction, sometimes noble, sometimes horrifying. What happened to Che Guevara in that Bolivian schoolhouse haunts us not just because of the brutality of his execution, but because it symbolizes the eternal struggle between idealism and power, between revolution and the status quo. His severed hands, sent as proof of death, couldn't stop his ideas from spreading. His body, hidden in an unmarked grave for 30 years, couldn't erase his influence. In the end, perhaps Guevara was right. They could only kill the man. The ideas, the symbol, the icon. Those live on, for better or worse, shaping movements and inspiring debates that continue today. That's the shocking, disturbing truth about Che Guevara. A story most history books won't tell you this way. If you want more unfiltered history that challenges everything you thought you knew, go subscribe to Fleek of History right now. Smash that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with anyone ready to face history's darkest truths. We're just getting started, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next one.